couple of things, because we are on an online call. If you can keep yourself on mute wherever possible. If you do want to ask a question, either put it in the chat or put your hand up and we'll come to it as soon as we can. As I said, your video is optional. It's always helpful if you've got it on, but I do appreciate that not everybody wants to have their face online. Quick overview of how it's going to go today. We've got an hour and a half and we're going to do a little bit of Mentimeter, which is a kind of an online poll, which we can go through as we read it, as they come up on the screen. There's a short video around what is Walk Derbyshire, and the reason it's a video is because there's 8 of these events, so we wanted everybody to have the same information without any changes or anything. So there's a little video. Then we're going to go into some breakout rooms to talk about what a system approach would look like in Amber Valley. And then we're going to go over to Scott Hartley, who is from Press Red, who's going to go through some Amber Valley specific data and other information that's relevant as well. And then we'll have another quick Mentimeter and we'll go to next steps. So I think we've got probably, Katie, everybody, looks like quite a few people here now. So yeah, if people will start, anybody who's just turned up since I said if you could put who you are and where you're from in the chat, that'd be really helpful. Just going to go, first of all, Katie, if you could put the Mentimeter up, which is the introduction really. So it's why walking is important to you personally or in your work. And so that should go into your chat, I think, and then you'll be able to open the Mentimeter from your chat.
Sorry, so you should be able to see either going to menti.com and using the code, and then I will just put the direct link in as well. But you can either go to, can you see why is walking important to you personally or in your work?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you go to menti.com and use that code, and I will just put the chat in the thing. Sorry, I will just put the direct link in the chat, although I might just have to exit this full screen to do that. Just bear with me a second. Honestly, I'm still in Christmas mode.
What's the code? 42151716.
Yes. But let me just I might have to come out of this. Apologies, I'd copied the link. But it wasn't working. Are you still seeing the screen?
Yeah.
And have you now got the actual link? So thank you.
Sorry, yes, it's there. Thank you. So we've got a couple coming in. So we've got mental and physical well-being, from a mental health and general health. Really great to get outdoors, meeting up with other people and spending time in nature, enjoying the views and the chat. Getting out into the great outdoors. It enables me to be more productive when I'm in my workspace. Running a networking group, I can see the benefits for those who come along. Being outside in the fresh air gets you outside, and it provides a lot of minutes to people being active. Yeah, lots there about generally being outside, which is good. It's important for my health and well-being, exercise mentally and physically, for overall well-being and engaging with others in my community, and to increase well-being of our clients. Yeah, lovely. So as I said, this is all being recorded, and you will get a copy of all this after the event. Just going to show you now this short video. Do bear with me while I make it work. Doesn't always come up where I think it's going to come up. So yeah, it's not. Just have to look at yourselves for a second there. Here we go. Don't know if I pressed the right thing there. I'll try again. You have to put the volume on. Told you I always do this bit wrong. Here we go. The vision of Walk Derbyshire is to make everyday walking the norm for all residents of Derbyshire, with a focus on our inactive population and our disadvantaged communities. We want to create a culture of walking with an emphasis around walking with our own communities and from our own doorsteps. We know that walking contributes to the vast majority of physical activity. It's available and accessible to everyone. There's an undaunting entry level, especially for those who are inactive. We know the physical and mental health benefits to walking. And when we talk about walking, we're talking about walking for both travel and for leisure. And we do know that walking is a cheap and clean way to travel. There are a number of elements to how Walk Derbyshire will be delivered. Insight and evaluation. Insight's important to ensure we're driven by our current knowledge and gaps in that knowledge and what walking levels look like across Derbyshire between our different demographics and geographies. Pressfred have been commissioned to complete bespoke walking insight packs, which will be shared with you today, with the aim to help guide conversations around how, where and who you can influence to walk more. Evaluation is important to capture and share learning on successes and things that could have gone better with a wider audience, and to help us to iteratively change our approach to Walk Derbyshire. Leeds Beckett University are our Walk Derbyshire evaluation partners, and they'll be embedding themselves into our work. A PhD student will be recruited to start in February 2023, and their initial focus will be on Walk Derbyshire. Communication and engagement. We need to build relationships across all sectors and with the communities that we work with. And we need to recognise the importance of co-production in everything that we do. When it comes to workforce, we need to make sure we're supporting them. Our workforce includes those who directly engage with people about walking, to those who could advocate walking as part of their wider work. These could be people who are either paid or in voluntary roles. So what do they need to be able to enable people to walk more, and how can we support them? As part of our work, Walk Derbyshire will invest across the county to enable us to evaluate and share learning around how we support our residents to walk more on an everyday basis. Chesterfield, Erewash, Bolsover and North East Derbyshire will have the opportunity to be active neighbourhood pilots. These are our 4 districts with the highest levels of inactivity and the highest levels of deprivation. And that will provide an opportunity for stakeholders to come together with their communities to agree on the best ways to invest funding on a place-based level to increase levels of walking. High Peak, Derbyshire Dales, South Derbyshire and Amber Valley will have the opportunity to be community engagement and co-production pilots. So that's working with the community to develop an understanding of the barriers and opportunities to support residents to walk more. Within our Walk Derbyshire pilots, there are some principles we aim to embed. They include tackling local inequality and working where the greatest need is. We need to ensure that targeted community engagement is embedded in co-creation, delivery and evaluation. We need to collaborate, share and learn across local priority places and share that learning across Derbyshire. We need to ensure that we're looking at a systems approach, considering the widest range of influences and interactions. We need to ensure our practice is inclusive and that all our opportunities are available to anyone. We need to make sure we're connecting communities and ensuring people can access appropriate local opportunities. And we want to embed the Walk Derbyshire vision at a local level. Today's session will help support the pilots, and moving on from this, each district and borough will look at developing a consortium who will develop their local bid and take the pilot work forward. The pilot work provides us with an opportunity for each district and borough to explore and develop a system approach to walking. I'm now going to hand over to James Cook, who will talk us through the complexities and benefits of a system approach to walking.
Walk Derbyshire aims to adopt a systems approach to walking. It's important for us to develop a shared understanding of what system working means to us. A system is a way of thinking about the bigger picture. Systems thinking is less concerned with how an individual, department or organisation operates, but more with how the connections, interactions and feedback between them help shape the outcomes we want to see. When considering the wider sectors that play a role in enabling people to move more, it includes partners such as health, community safety, voluntary community sector, business, highways and many, many more. So why is taking a systems approach important for Walk Derbyshire? Physical inactivity, like many other social outcomes, is complex. By this, we mean there are a range of different factors that will impact upon whether a person is or isn't active. If we think about some of those different factors, for example, are there footpaths for people to walk on and what condition are they in? Are there main roads to cross? Are there planning applications around active travel and what do these include? And do people feel safe in their own communities? All of those different factors are interacting with each other in different ways at different times. And of course, when we talk with our communities to understand their lives, what's important to them, and what would enable them to walk more, we need to remember that each individual and family unit will experience those factors in different ways. As with all complex issues, there isn't a single intervention or solution. There's not one organisation or individual that has the answers. Change requires collective action from across sectors at all layers. We need to work collaboratively with our communities and with different partners and different sectors to understand those factors impacting on whether people choose to walk and what does that mean for our collective action. So how do we know that we are working in complexity? Well, some of what we do will be simple, some of it will be complicated, and some of it will be complex. For example, we know that something is simple if by taking an action, we know that it will achieve the desired outcome. For example, if we switch a light switch on, we know that the light will come on. For something that is complicated, we know that if we take several actions, often expert steps, that it will achieve the desired outcome. For example, a mechanic will know that when fixing a car engine, that they need to take several steps, often in the right order, at the right time, to achieve that desired outcome. In terms of complexity, well, we know we are working in complexity when we do not know in advance if something will work. For example, just because something works in one community, it does not mean that it will work in another community, or even that it would work in that same community a year down the line. It is important to recognise and understand when we are working in complexity. The good news is that although we do not know in advance if something will work, we can plan for working in complexity. Key to this is setting up processes to enable us to learn quickly about what is working so that we can amplify it. And just as importantly, learn quickly about what doesn't work so that we can stop or adapt. As we've established around inactivity, we know that we are working in complexity. So we need to feel comfortable that the work is to explore, experiment, and learn together about how Walk Derbyshire can enable people to walk.
Brilliant. Am I back in the room? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that was the little video around Walk Derbyshire and the systems approach. So Katie, if you can prepare the next Mentimeter, and the question is, which system partner do you represent? And we can show that as a visual. If you're doing it through the Mentimeter, you might have to press next question to get it up. Wow, Jog Derbyshire's in there straight away. Bit of competition there. Jog Derbyshire's much bigger than Walk Derbyshire. Don't know what we're going to do about that. We've got adult social care, public health, Amber Valley CVS, Amber Valley Borough Council, coaching in nature, public health. I don't know if I've said that. It keeps moving, so I can't remember what I've said now. Brilliant. So it's a good range of people, lots of people who are already in the active network as well. So we might want to consider later on throughout what we're doing, who else we need to be involved in this meeting today. So what we're going to do next, thank you very much, Katie, for that. Oh, Derbyshire carers, lovely. What we're going to do next is we're going to go into breakout rooms. So we're going to go into breakout rooms for 15 minutes, and then there'll be a quick roundup of everything that people have said. And we're going to talk about what a system approach looks like in Amber Valley. I think you will be automatically transported to your breakout room, and in your top left corner there'll be a little countdown so you know when it's going to finish. You've all got a facilitator in your room who talk you through it, and it'll be that person that does the feedback to the group as well. So And at the end, there's been some instances where people have had to rejoin the meeting. So if you do get kicked out when you come out of your breakout room, you might have to rejoin the meeting, but it would be obvious how to do it, I think.
So we had a conversation to begin with around you know, what does this systems approach mean to us as a group? So we started talking about the learning side of it and how we can use this to learn as about how to encourage people to walk more, the need for collaboration. We talked about the diverse range of organizations that popped up on the screen just before we did that exercise, and then we started to recognize, but there's lots of other groups out there that are potentially interested in this and might need to be connected to it in some way. We had a little bit of a conversation about some people wanting to, you know, be involved in this work, to look at how they might learn to get their own team, their own the staff in their organization walking more and moving more, which I thought was really good. And out of that conversation, we started to talk a little bit about, you know, the reluctance, you know, or the challenge of meeting some of the people that are more reaching some of the people that are more reluctant to move and more reluctant to walk. And I'll come back to that in a minute. We had a bit of a conversation around who's missing, you know, and we were talking because we want to get everyone walking, you know, everyone's missing in a sense, but what are the organizations that could help us reach? We talked about not many people in the room from a children, or, you know, this was our feeling, there might be others in the room that had a different view, but around children and young people and family connections to help us reach into that side of the community. Decision makers locally, you know, whether that's politicians or whether that's senior people within local authorities or the NHS, etc., but actually what does that look like for us? You know, a couple of services that were picked up on were around planning and transportation, and the need to make sure we've got connections there. Obviously some of that's a function of the district, local authority, and others part of the county, so there's certainly some connections to be made there. And then we talked about other businesses and how we might want to connect this learning around getting our staff moving a bit more to other organizations that might be interested in the well-being of their employees. And then in terms of barriers, we just had a quick conversation around actually a need for us all to maybe understand why we are in the room together, you know, so what is it that's our personal interest for individually and for our organization, and looking what that looks like, understanding what that looks like collectively. We had a bit of a conversation around the time to commit and contribute and be involved in this, and thinking about how we can bring it into our wider work. And then we had a little bit of a conversation around that reluctant part of our community that's maybe not moving as much, and about trying to present this in a way that it's not about putting your gym kit on and you know, going to an opportunity. You know, part of this might be going out for an organized walk, part of this might be just thinking about how you build a few more steps into your daily life and your daily routines. So that was, I think, a summary. Have I missed anything? Anyone in our group, Heather, anything you heard that I've missed? That's all the notes that I made as well, so yeah, I think you've done it quite well. I think the only other thing was something around the natural structure of Amber Valley. There's not necessarily always a clear route from your door to where you want to go. Point, so yes. that was mentioned that was at the right at the end, just that some places it might be a bit more difficult to actually get out and do a bit of walking for some communities, which I thought was an interesting comment. Brilliant, thanks, Scott. It's a good roundup. Can we go to Craig next?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, my group was Chris Frost from the CVS, Dean Watson from Parish Council, Shipley, I think, Jenny from Jog Derbyshire, and Derek Walk Leader from Balfour. And I guess in the 10 minutes we had, we did in some respects covered a lot in terms of the levels or the layers of the system that affect walking participation and access. So from some of the system-wide barriers, Derek's example around a footpath, the Riverside footpath in Belper that was affected by flooding 2 years ago, that still has physical barriers for people to actually walk there. It's do not walk here, even though people are continuing to, but it is actually a physical barrier, and that challenge that we've got with you know, with partners and so on to overcome some of those system barriers. Through that, we talked about the absolute need the collective need to work together from borough council and county council level through to the community organisations and partners that exist across Amber Valley. And obviously it's great to see a number of people on this call today. We also got into then some of the sort of more personal or individual barriers and motivations to walk in, from the great British weather through to mental well-being to sometimes the challenge of leaving the front door. So all sorts of challenges and barriers, I guess, around some of the individual factors that contribute to walking and being active. We also touched on the need for some walking groups, particularly around community safety and accessibility and confidence and all the sort of social benefits that come from walking together. So covered quite a basis really of different things, from system to individual to groups and community safety and so on. That is in a bit of a nutshell what we discussed, but unless Derek, Dean, Jenny, Chris want to add, I'll finish there.
Looks good. Thank you, Craig. Is it just Helen left who facilitated the room, or is there somebody else? Just Helen?
There was 3 rooms, but unfortunately Helen, she wasn't able to get into the room either, so it was a bit of a challenge.
Helen, do you want to come in if you can say anything at all?
She's just resetting up in the same room as me, so I think she's about ready.
Hello, can you hear me? Turn your volume down.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello, sorry, we've had some awful technical issues. So I would say from our group, they managed very well for the first sort of 7 or 8 minutes, just having a general catch up and getting to know each other. So I think that went down quite well, hopefully. There was Richard, Linda, Sarah, Kirk, Jeannie and myself in the room. I would say we were only left with sort of a few minutes for discussion once we got past the issues. So in terms of people who were missing from this call today, potentially Sisu around kind of long-term health condition management, and maybe inviting them along in particular to the in-face delivery, because they also manage the long-term health conditions course now across the county. Also a note, again, linking back to the first point that Scott made around schools and children and young people, and maybe them not obviously being represented. I've got a couple of ideas of who initially we might be able to invite as that, but maybe a wider invitation as well to the in-person event. There's a couple of people at the council that unfortunately couldn't be at the meeting today, but definitely should be able to make the one later in February. So in terms of town centre planning and regeneration, so hopefully they should be able to come along to that in early February. Also, there was a link made from Sarah, and I don't know if you want to elaborate on it a little bit more, Sarah, but around linking to kind of getting the most sort of isolated people walk in and what an avenue it can be for them. So that links to another piece of work at the council that will be hopefully looking to link together with this around community models of health referral and linking walking into that. But Sarah, I didn't know if you wanted to extend on that point a little bit.
Yeah, I can do. I set up a networking group which I've called Amber Networking, knowing that people who are in business on their own, quite a lot of them work at home, and it takes a lot to actually get out and about. And sometimes you can feel very, very lonely and isolated. So I think people have got this image of it being somebody who's elderly and frail or already is in the system, if you like, of needing to get out and needing some sort of social, sounds awful saying socialisation, but that sort of connection with people. So that's why I've set up Amber Networking, so that these people who feel lonely can come along. It's once a month at the moment, and the connections that we make are great. People feel that they're able to talk to each other in a much more relaxed manner, rather than in a networking environment where you're standing there in a cup of tea in a room where you can't get out and maybe feel a little bit more encumbered by your environment. But I would love to actually extend the networking thing out to encourage many more people to be involved, so that they don't feel that getting outside, I've been told I need to do more of it. If there's a whole group of people going out, you're going to feel slightly more inclined to do it, and it's going to help you feel less isolated, and that doesn't matter who you are.
Sarah, if you want to put a link in the chat to if you've got a website or whatever it is, then feel free to do it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Kurt, do you want to come in?
Yeah, we also mentioned the need to link in more with schools in terms of starting that walking habit sooner. And what also sprung to mind whilst we were feeding back was Derbyshire County Council's Healthy Workplace programme that we used to have a lot more contact with. And in fact, our officers used to go in and do health checks in workplaces. But, you know, I bet most people drive to work, don't they? So it's part of that education as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Kirk. Helen, are you any more roundups to do?
I think that's pretty much me. I think from my perspective, sorry again to the group for the technical issues, but there is also from a Amber Valley perspective, there is linked to our current programme as well with GoGo and linking into some of the impact that project's had, and linking in the walking opportunities and the great work that Chris is doing around the couch to 5X as well. So, but yeah, other than that, I think that's me.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Helen. So we're going to pass over to Scott very shortly to give the specific Amber Valley data and information, which has gone down really well so far with other areas. Just before we do, just to lead into it, if we can do another Mentimeter around what your expectation is from this work, that would be really good, and we can hopefully that will help him to lead into some of his information. And then following on from Scott, we'll have a quick discussion about what Scott said, any other opportunities that there are to feed into, so some of the things that you've just mentioned, Helen and Sarah, and then I'll talk about the next steps. So into the Mentimeter, what is your expectation from this work? Again, you might have to press next question.
I really like that. Small changes can make a big difference. The implication of learning of what that small change is and how big the differences it makes is absolutely spot on for this work. Are there any others? People, I can see people busy typing. Yeah, linking the work with other wider opportunities with people to share information, connect with colleagues. More opportunities and again, just going back to that learning element, you know, understanding what those opportunities are that reach the people that are reluctant walkers. I love that term that came up in my conversation. I'm going to be using a slightly different term a little bit later, but those that we struggle to reach, to help them engage with this. Better collaboration, learning, better connected, improved access, walking normalised, brilliant, absolutely in the right space. The reason why we want to do this was to just keep us out of solutions at the moment. You know, I'm going to drop some insight into your thinking in a minute or two. Hopefully, it will start to help us understand who's walking and who's not walking in the Amber Valley. And then, you know, in your workshop in February, you can take this into the conversation around how we want to focus this particular piece of work. And I'm blown away. I was blown away before Christmas, and I'm blown away again just about how many people are interested in this area and this space. And so finding how we work together, you know, that's the really important space where we can really start to have an impact. This is the bit where it could all go wrong again, and as we've had issues already on technical side of things, it could be about to happen again. I am going to share. I'm going to try and upload something so that we can all see a slide deck. So in a second or two, can you please let me know whether you can see the slides? Yeah, can you see them? Right. I just want to I'm just going to do a little practice because we know what happens, Heather, don't we? If I move on, can you all still see the next slide?
Yeah, there's lots of nodding. Yeah,
brilliant. Okay. If anything goes wrong as we go through this, you can use the arrows at the bottom underneath the slide on your screen to click forward onto the next slide yourself. So hopefully you should be able to see it that way. Okay, I've got about 25 minutes, I think, 30 minutes to just try and get to life walking in Amber Valley. I'm going to start by doing a little bit more broadly about physical activity and what's happening in terms of physical activity. And then I'm going to get into a bit of detail around what does walking look like, who walks, who doesn't. And Heather and Craig and the Active Derbyshire team challenged us to, you know, get underneath the skin of this a little bit and start to think about walking frequency, because one of the things that we want to achieve through Walk Derbyshire is to get people walking more often, more regularly, and that's not that easy to do in some of the data sets that we've got available too, but we've got a way of doing it. So hopefully it'll make sense as we go through this. And I'm going to get down and I'm going to show you that we can get down into place. So some of those comments that were made earlier in my group about you know, some places don't walk as much. Well, we can maybe look at, you know, where there's groups of people that aren't walking as much and where they're living in Amber Valley. So we'll hopefully kind of show some of that as well, and then we'll have a little bit of a conversation at the end and give you a chance to ask questions. Okay, so what have you got on your screen now? Okay, this is a trend diagram, for want of a better description. It's got 6 years across the bottom, and then you've got these red dots. Let's follow the red dots to begin with. What are they? That's the proportion of adults that are inactive, physically inactive in Amber Valley over the 6 years of data that we've got. Okay, what does inactive mean? Well, this part of our population is a group of people that's doing less than 30 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity a week. Okay, and if you're doing less than 30 minutes, the chief medical officer puts you into this category of being inactive, and you're not getting the health benefits of moving. Okay, and as you can see, over the 6 years of data in Amber Valley, it's dropped from about 28% of the population, so nearly 1 in 3, down to about 1 in 4 in the latest year of data, which takes us up to November 2021. The black line that red line over crosses, that's the national data. Okay, just as a little bit of a reference point. The lines at the top, the green dot, if you follow the dotted green line, that's the proportion of adults that are active. What does that mean? That group of people are achieving 150 minutes or more of moderate intensity physical activity. And you can see that it's gone up from 62% to 67%. So what's positive is from baseline, things have improved, which is great. But in the latest couple of years, inactivity dropped down just before the pandemic. The pandemic has nudged it up, and it's nudged up again in the latest year of data. Look how it's gone from 23 to 24, but not huge. And we haven't gone all the way back to what the levels of inactivity were at baseline either, which is a positive. But we do have this situation where the pandemic has pushed inactivity up. But interestingly, it hasn't done the same to reducing active levels. So the people that are doing between 30 and 150 minutes, that's the bit that's got squeezed by the pandemic. So we've got a positive in terms of activity levels, but we've got a little bit of a challenge in terms of inactivity levels worsening a little bit since the pandemic. That's a pattern we've seen nationally, but nationally it's leveled off and bounced back a bit, where that's not quite happened in Amber Valley. I'll come back to that in a minute or two. I just want to show you what we've done with the walking data. As I mentioned earlier, we've been challenged to start to think about walking frequency. So what we can do with this survey, this data, by the way, for adults, 500 adults across Amber Valley, are surveyed every year on a rolling basis. So over the 6 years, we've got 3,000 people that have completed this survey in Amber Valley, and we've used all of that data to try and just bring some things to life. So what we've got here now is how we started to look at walking behaviour. So the group at the bottom, if we start with the big red bit, 3 in 10 people, okay, not walking. What on earth does not walking mean? How would we analyse that? Well, what that means is that this group of people have not managed to achieve one session in the last 28 days of walking for more than 10 minutes. Okay, they may have done a number of sessions where they've walked for 5 or 6 minutes, but we've brought this kind of link in to be able to analyze the data, this kind of factor in of 10 minutes or more. Okay, and we've got 30% of the population that in the last month haven't walked for 10 minutes or more. Okay, you then, what's the group above? Well, the group above, the 25%, so a quarter of our population, walking less regularly. What have they done? Well, they've done somewhere between 1 and 7 sessions of walking of 10 minutes or more in the last 28 days, up to a couple of times a week. Okay, the group above that, well, they've done between 8 and 27 sessions of 10 minutes or more of walking. And then you've got the regular walkers, they're doing 28 sessions per month or more sessions per month of 10-minute walks. Okay, walking very frequently. We can't turn around to you and say that they're walking daily, because we can't manipulate the data like that. But so we were having to make an assumption that they're pretty, regular walkers are walking often, many days in the month. But the data isn't collected. What did you do on a Monday and what did you do on the Tuesday, and so we can't apply it today. So we've used 28 sessions per month as a way of showing these people are walking a lot, and they're doing a lot of minutes walking. I'm going to look at this data demographically and via a number of different groups in a minute or two. But what I want to just make the connection to is between these first couple of slides that I've shown you. Okay, so I've told you around what inactive is. So what am I looking at? If you just focus on the left hand side and the not walking towers, what you've got here is that focus on the 66.8. What is that? Okay, well, what that's telling us is of the group that aren't walking, so that 30% of the Amber Valley population, nearly 70% of them are physically inactive. So they're not getting their minutes from somewhere else. And about 27% of those people, so the green bit on here for above the not walking label, they're basically getting their minutes from other activities that is not walking. So they're playing sport, they might be doing gardening, they might be going for a run, they might be riding their bike. They're active, they're getting their minutes, but they're not getting them through walking. But what you see here now is, look what happens to the proportion of inactive when we start to walk a little bit. So remember that walking less regularly was between 1 and 7 sessions of 10 minutes or more. Look at how small the inactive group is now. So if we get people just doing a bit of walking, a little, 1, 2, 3 times a week, a couple of times a week, they're likely to get their minutes to be physically active. So getting people walking is important, and it's really important activity when we come to thinking about people's activity levels. As I mentioned, we've been looking at this data, we've been putting it together, we've been playing around with it. What you've got here is how over the 6 years of data for adults that we've got, you can see how those different categories have changed. What's really positive here is look at the decrease in the proportion that's not walking. It's gone from nearly 4 in 10 of the population down to 3 in 10 of the population in the latest year of data. And what's interesting is the pandemic has had very little impact on that. Yeah, it's pushed it up a fraction, but not much at all. So this is positive. We were on a positive trend. The proportion of the population that's not doing much walking is decreasing. You can start to see how the pattern in terms of regular walking has changed over the years. So we've got this situation in the Amber Valley where activity levels have been improving, and funnily enough, walking levels have been improving as well. We've had more people doing more walking, which is one of the reasons why Amber Valley's activity levels have dropped from and then improved from baseline. So we've got this situation that we need to try and unpick a little bit more. So I'm going to start by doing that by looking at some demographics. Let me just explain a couple of groups on this slide because they might not make much sense. I'm going to start on the far right of the slide, NSSEC 1 to 2. What on earth is NSSEC 1 to 2? When we all fill in the census, we answer 7 questions. It's like, what's your job? What kind of qualifications you've got? How much money is household income, etc., etc. ONS, the Office of National Statistics, use those questions to put every household into socioeconomic classification. Okay, NSSEC 1 to 2 are households where the people in there are likely to be directors, chief executives, professionally qualified GPs, solicitors, accountants, all of that space. If you're in a household with a person that's that, then you're in NSSEC 1 to 2. NSSEC 6 to 8, lower socioeconomic groups. This is people that are in routine, semi-routine work, long-term unemployed and never worked. What does routine and semi-routine work mean? It's people that are in roles like cleaning roles, labourers, retail, shop floor workers in retail, etc., etc. NSSEC 3 to 5, that's middle socioeconomic groups. So that's people that will have technical qualifications. Some people were one of those is people that own their own business and self-employed. Another part of that is people that are lower and middle supervisors in larger organizations. The no limiting illness is people without a limiting illness or disability. The limiting illness on the far left is people with a limiting illness or disability. The other things on there are ethnicity and age, which are pretty straightforward. And then you've got the 4 categories. Okay, look at how high not walking is amongst part of our community that's got a limiting illness or disability. The next group, though, might be a bit of a surprise. Young adults. This is one of the groups in our community that are generally quite active, but they're not walking. And they're not, so they're one of, when we talked about that 27% of people that were active but not walking, well, a big group of the 16 to 34-year-olds would make up that 27%. So we've got this group of younger adults that don't like to walk. We've then got lower socioeconomic communities. So I'm going to go into that group in a little bit more detail later, so I'll come back to it. The one bit I want to observe before we move on, we put arrows on it. Look at the difference between men and women in terms of the proportion of not walking. Okay, that is a really big gap, with women much more likely to be walking than men. Okay, so we need to try and get our heads around that a little bit. Let me show it you in a slightly different way. This is just the not walking proportion now, and it's a trend line. So it's similar to the first slide that 6 years of data. It's the proportion of people that are not walking in each of those demographic groups. Look at the difference between men and women, and actually it's been much closer. You know, it's a big gap at baseline, then it's got much closer, then the pandemic has really opened it up again. Look how pre-pandemic 28% of men were not walking, 31% of women were not walking, but since the pandemic's come along, women in Amber Valley have found it helpful to be walking, help them to walk more, whereas men haven't. What's going on there? I need your intelligence to try and help me understand why we've got that pattern. You can see that the trend in terms of people with a limited illness or disability, it's high. It's wobbled around a little bit, but it started off at 47. It's still up at that kind of level. Nearly half of that proportion of our population are not walking for 10 minutes or more. NSSEC 6 to 8. Look at how that has come down. That's the first bit to observe with that. And then it's fluctuated a little bit in the pandemic, still pretty high. And then look at the 16 to 34-year-olds as well. Another group that's experienced the pandemic maybe a bit more difficult. You know, we found the pandemic a bit more difficult in terms of getting out and walking. And look at how it compares to the other age group. Our age group that isn't walking is our younger adults. And so what does that mean to our work and how we think about this? I will come back to that in a few minutes. Just looking at, we've got to put all of the data together to break it down by kind of employment status, just because the sample's quite small on a yearly basis. So this is all 6 years of data put together. And when you do that and you analyze it by work status, you can see there's some quite interesting differences with those that are that part of our population that are unemployed. experiencing quite high levels of not walking, 4 in 10. So we need to be thinking, and that group often relates with lower socioeconomic group, because there's often higher rates of unemployment in our lower socioeconomic communities. And so there is a real connection here for us to be unpicking it, and I'll be coming back to that again in a minute or two. I just want to. We can also cut this information by deprivation. What on earth do I mean by that? Some boffins somewhere create the indices of multiple deprivation, and what that is they use a range of different factors to assess how deprived communities are, different kind of spaces of community are. And the factors that they use are things like employment, level of income, education levels, etc., access to services, etc., etc. And this model breaks all communities in England down into 10 different groups. You've got the most deprived at one end of the scale, and then you've got the least deprived at the other end of the scale. Okay, we can't get the data enough yet to be able to look at each of those 10 different groups. So we've had to create 4 groups. So we've got the most deprived quartile on the left and the least deprived quartile of communities on the right. Look at how much higher not walking is amongst our more deprived communities. Okay, and obviously we can map some of this, and it helps us to understand where and I'm sure many of you are already familiar with where our more deprived communities are when it comes to that range of factors that have been used for that work. But you can see how it makes a difference. And this is important, going back to that point that was made that some of our communities might not be connected to space and to green space and to parks, and I will build on this shortly. Next few slides, I'm going to focus on lower socioeconomic communities. It's a group that's a challenge in the Amber Valley, and it's certainly a group that is not walking as much across Derbyshire, which is one of the reasons why we've put a bit of a spotlight on it in terms of the work across all areas. But there's quite big differences between the areas, but that's for us to tease out as we continue the work. What you've got here is a similar slide to earlier where we've broken it down by demographic groups, but this is just NSX 6 to 8, our lower socioeconomic communities now, and we've got the same 2 groups on the left hand side. It's our young adults in lower socioeconomic communities, and it's those with a limited illness and disability within lower socioeconomic communities. But look at how the towers have grown. Look at how the tower has grown for men. Remember, it's 37% not walking for all men in Amber Valley. It's now 44. We're getting up to nearly half of the male population that are not doing a 10-minute walk. Okay, the inequality though between men and women, not much. Okay, there is a bit of inequality there, but it's not. But we've had to aggregate the data, and that would kind of even things out a little bit. But there is a bit of an inequality there. But there is certainly something to be thinking about within lower socioeconomic communities, those with a limited illness and disability, younger men and women that might not be walking as much as they could. And going back to Kirk's point earlier on, how do we establish habit? We just got to accept that as we age, our walking changes, and I will come back to that a little bit later. I want to just look at a bit of analysis that we've done now, just to help you understand, there's different kind of motivations for walking, and we can break this data down and look at this. Again, I'm staying focused on this group that's our lower socioeconomic communities. Okay, right. Takes a bit of explaining this, but stick with me. We're going to start on the far left, okay, the one that's got a light blue tower and a dark blue tower, and it's got 4 and 4 above it. Okay, what on earth are you looking at? Right, you're looking at here is in 2015, 2016, people within lower socioeconomic communities in Amber Valley were doing 4 sessions of walking for leisure, 4 sessions for walking for travel. Okay, per week. Okay, and why is there a difference between the height of the towers when they're both 4? Well, the depth of the tower indicates the length of the session. So if they were doing a longer session on average, the block's bigger, the block's deeper. That's why you've got a difference, is that they're more likely to walk for a bit longer walking for leisure than they were walking for travel back in 2015-16. Now I want you to jump all the way to the right. Look at what the pandemic has done. first thing to notice, look at how the light blue tower has grown. People have been going out and walking for leisure. That pattern, that increase or the decrease in not walking that we saw pre-pandemic was generally, not completely, but was people going out walking for leisure in Amber Valley more than walking for travel. But you can also see the walking for travel was going up as well pre-pandemic. Then look at the 2 years and what the pandemic has done to walking behaviour in the Amber Valley. The light blue tire was even higher, getting even more minutes from it, and the walking for travel has disappeared. I'll come back to the two groups that are really likely to walk for travel after on the next slide. Another way of looking at this is to look at the minutes that come from these exercises and from these different ways of walking. On the left, you've got the minutes from walking for travel across the adult population in Amber Valley. On the right, you've got the minutes from walking, sorry, on the left, walking for leisure, and on the right, walking for travel. Look at that steady increase of minutes from walking for leisure across adults over the 6 years, and look at what the pandemic has done to it. Now look on the right and look at how active travel minutes, walking minutes for travel reasons has plummeted because of the pandemic. Okay, who's more likely to walk for travel? Young adults, our diverse communities, and I haven't mentioned them yet, I'll come back to them in a minute, and our low socioeconomic communities, because they're less likely to own cars, so they're more likely to walk for travel, and they're less likely to walk for leisure. So what's this suggesting to us? Well, our older population have replaced some of the minutes during the pandemic with getting out for a leisurely walk, and our younger population hasn't. And then they've seen disruption in sports provision that they're used to relying on for getting their minutes, and they've not replaced it. And that's why we've got this increase in inactivity in the Amber Valley. So we've got this really nuanced situation that we need to be thinking about. Well, actually, what do we want to learn about? What does that mean? I'm going to try and take this down now and get into a little bit more detail. Okay, and get it down into community, into places. Sport England produced these maps, produced data based on the Active Life survey. This is from pre-pandemic, so just keep that in your mind. And we can map it down to smaller areas than the whole of Amber Valley. Okay, so what have you got here? You've got inactivity, the proportion of people that are inactive, and it's mapped down to something called a middle super output area. Geeky, I know. What's a middle super output area? Well, within each of those little patches that you can see on the map, between 5,000 and 15,000 people live in one of those patches. Okay, and we can use these estimates to map the data, but this is pre-pandemic and it hasn't been updated for a while. So what can we do to get underneath the skin of this, because we need to do this work now? Well, also in this data set is this wonderful little gem that is around it. It's a bit boring. It's called output area classification. What on earth is output area classification? The ONS, the really big brains at the Office of National Statistics, put all of us, when the census is done, into 75 little groups where we share like characteristics. Okay, we're all, every single one of us is in one of these groups. Okay, those 75 little groups build up a group together and make 25 groups. The 25 groups are grouped together and make 8 super groups. We can get the data at an Amber Valley level for the 8 super groups. At a Derbyshire level, we can get it for the middle 25 subgroups. Okay, for the super groups, they're not my titles, by the way. Don't blame me. But you've got data in terms of those that are not walking for 5 of the 8 groups. Just bear in mind, though, that the sample for the constrained city dwellers is really quite small, so we just need to be very cautious with it. Okay, so we can look at who's not walking. Why is this helpful? Well, we can map these groups down to a very small geographic level. So on here, I think we've picked Belper because it's where my mate Martin lives nearby. On here, what you've got now is those groups that I've just mentioned. So if I just go back a slide, remember constrained city dwellers and hard pressed living. Then let's have a look at Belper. Constrained city dwellers are the streets that are highlighted blue. Hard pressed living are the streets that are highlighted yellow. We can take this data and start to make some reasonably sound assumptions of where within Belper there's higher levels of people that are not walking. So how do we think about going and engaging in those parts of our communities and listening to residents and working alongside residents about trying to understand why we're not walking and what we might need to do to our environment to create a more conducive environment for everybody to walk? What's been the impact of the pandemic on encouraging people to walk for leisure or not, or the impact on walking for travel patterns? We've picked Belpit on here, but you'll see the source at the bottom, and there's also a link on this slide. You can go and use an online mapping tool to explore the rest of the Amber Valley and where the groups that are more likely to be not walking are living. Okay, and what I want to just put into your mind as well, I am nicking, borrowing, casually just bringing in and utilizing, because it's really helpful, some data from Greater Manchester. So I'm bringing it out of Derbyshire. Just remember that for a minute. This is now Greater Manchester information slide that I borrowed. Okay, why have I used it? I've used this because they've got this extra bit of data. This was done pre-pandemic, by the way. They've got this survey that they do across residents in Greater Manchester where they ask people where they walk to. And I think it's a wonderful slide, because when I saw that active travel, active walking for travel data, my automatic assumption is people not, go back to the networking conversation earlier. Well, a lot more people working at home, people aren't getting their minutes walking to and from work or public transport. That's what my assumption was. But look how low down the list walking and work is. Look at all the places where people walk to more often than work. Going to green spaces, primary schools, worship, job centre, health centre, banking, secondary school, seeing friends, shopping, attending, all of those above it. Now look at that list again. What's the pattern in that list? Well, how many of those things have gone online because of the pandemic? Okay. GP, health centre. We all hear the thing about people wanting to go back to their GP, and they're all doing online or phone appointments. Job centre, gone online. Banking, gone online. Shopping, going online. Okay, these things have been removed from daily life and are not coming back in any significant way. They will for some people, because older people still like to see their GP. But younger adults, who we've already got a bit of a challenge with walking, much more comfortable to do these services online. So what does that mean to what people want to walk to in their communities now? Back to the point that was made earlier about the whole children and young people space. How do we build the habit by walking to school? What can we do in that space to get more families in the habit of walking to and from school? We've got some challenges in the way that we think about our environment and residents' connections to their environment and their daily lives now, because things have changed because of the pandemic, and some of this isn't coming back, or if it comes back, it's going to come back in a much more limited way to what it was done previously. A final word now on walking on children and young people. The data set for the children and young people the sample isn't as big as it is for adults, so we can't as easily do a detailed analysis at an Amber Valley level for children and young people, but we have done a detailed analysis of it at a Derbyshire level, and we've looked into differences in walking. I'm just going to share one slide from it and explain what we're seeing. Okay, so this is children aged between 5 and 16 years old that are walking at least once a week in the last week. Okay, look at the first 2 years of data. Roughly around half of the population, children and young people population aged 5 to 16, were walking once a week pre-pandemic. Then the pandemic came. People like me dragged their kids out to walk for that hour that we could when you're allowed to go out your door, and some of that has stuck. Okay, and look at what's happened to walking once a week walking levels amongst children and young people since the pandemic. Brilliant. And what's even more brilliant about this data is there's two groups in particular that have been impacted the most: children in low affluence families and girls. Now, those two groups often experience lower levels of activity, overall physical activity, because they're less likely to play sport, but they've seen really big increases in walking at least once a week. How do we continue to build on that? And particularly the girls element. Teenage girls, which is a group that we have been trying to encourage to be more physically active for as long as I've worked in the sector, and it's not gone anywhere. Well, in the last 3 years, activity levels amongst teenage girls are going up. Okay, why? Walking. it is being driven by a growth in teenage girls going out to walk. Well, what is it that the teenage girls have found about walking that we can take and learn from and use to help us think about other parts of our community? There is more information about that in the county pack that's available from Heather, I guess, if you want to have a look at the children and young people in a bit more detail. That's me, I'm done. That's a summary of my messages that we've hopefully covered. I've seen the chat has been kicking off a little bit. Is there anything that I need to pick up? Is there anything that I've said that's wrong? Is there anybody that wants to shout at me? And then after we've done that bit, is there anything, is there, you know, the question I'd get asked you is, how do we make this richer? How do we bring your information and data around this to create a better picture than just the active lives data?
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, so as Helen has mentioned already, there's information from GOGA, and there's those sort of opportunities to link into. So if people can send me any local knowledge that they're aware of, we can use that into the second session as well. Scott, there's a question on car ownership, whether you've got details of the car ownership.
We will have soon. Hold your nerve. I can give you some detail from 2011, but that's a long time ago, and people have bought cars since then. But the new census data in this space should be fairly imminent. It should come quite soon now. So, and I think that'd be a better way of using it. And again, we can map that down to a very, very local level, you know, output area level, which is areas. Well, I showed you the map, less than 1,000 people. So it'll be very useful to get that and overlay it with some of that kind of ONS data that I shared with you. Going to Kirk's question about 20-minute neighbourhoods. I need to clarify this, but I've been led to believe that 20-minute neighbourhoods is 10 minutes out, 10 minutes back. I hope it is, because that is absolutely spot on. And I think because what I haven't showed you is another slide from GM, which shows you the average time that people walk to all of those things that were on the slide. And the highest was college and university, and the average journey for that was 18 minutes. All the others were between 10 and 13, 14 minutes. So it is 20-minute neighbourhood, as in 10 minute out, 10 minute back. What does it mean? Well, we've got to start thinking about how people, you know, think about those things that were at the top of the list: primary school, secondary school, places of worship. But more importantly, look how important getting to green space was. It was so significantly higher than anywhere else. So our connectivity to open and green space, absolutely fundamentally critical to getting people moving for leisure. It's a little bit different maybe if you're walking to and from work, and the pattern then we need to be thinking about our public transport infrastructure and our connectivity to it. Have I missed anything out in terms of questions on here?
I don't think so, Scott. There's been some good connecting going on, which is great. Helen's got a question.
Sorry, I'm hoping you can hear me. So I'd written down a couple of questions as we went through. So one was around, I think on slide 8, you said about people being active but not walking. I just wondered if there's any more clarification on that, as what do they class as walking, and within that question. So is walking, you know, sort of walking down to the shops to pick up a newspaper, or is that attending some kind of organised
walk?
No,
it's all walking.
Okay.
So the way that the survey asks the question, it asks if you've walked. So, you know, I asked if you've been active. There people are, well, I've walked, and then it'll explore where you've walked to and how you've walked and how long you've walked for and whether you got your heart rate up. So it covers all kinds of walking.
I just wonder for some people, when you ask them whether they've been walking, whether they see that as more organised activity than a you know, if you ask about walking, the survey,
the survey is quite well constructed in that way. I don't think people would. It's very clearly people are brought into it thinking broadly about their walking behaviour.
Okay, and then there was a couple of other things. It's nice to see that people are walking to green spaces and parks. I'm looking at Richard next to me, so that'll be an interesting piece for AVBC. But also whether there was any assumptions around, you spoke about women walking more than men, and from our registers across Amber Valley, I definitely say within our walking groups, that's definitely the case, but whether there was any assumptions in or around that point as well.
We can't put the two together, but I certainly, if you've got some data about that, we've got to bring that into the mix. We've got to try and understand where that's happening, and the bit that I'm really intrigued by, we need to be engaging with men about why it's not happening, what the difference is. I'm intrigued. This is the second, I can't remember which one the other one was, and it might come to me. This is the second local authority where we've seen a really striking inequality between men and women that has opened up since the pandemic. So what is it about our communities and working patterns and kind of work that might be contributing to what we're seeing there? Because it's interesting, and you know, we need to understand it better. I'm not sure we can do much more in the data. We could probably split walking for leisure and walking for travel between men and women and look at differences there. If that was something that you wanted us to have a look at, that's certainly something we could do. Yeah, I'm not so sure what else we could be able to help. But if you have any thoughts on what you've heard and any of that analysis and whether we could do it for men and women, ask, and we can have a look at whether we can do it.
I was going to say, we could definitely ask that question. It's interesting, in Amber Valley, we've got more male walk leaders than we have female walk leaders, but more females walking than males would be my, I would say that's a fair representation.
You've just triggered two things that I'll mention, Helen. The first thing is, I didn't mention ethnicity. I forgot, even though I told myself halfway through to mention it, I forgot. We can't get the data down at an Amber Valley level. The sample's just not robust enough. At a Derbyshire level, we've got quite significant inequalities between different ethnicities, with our white British community much more likely to be walking than our Asian and Black communities. And so there could potentially be some gender differences within that, which I think we need to be conscious of. In terms of that, you know, this experience that we've got, it's really fascinating, isn't it? So we've got more male walk leaders, but more female walkers come into the sessions. How do men, you know, the bit that makes me think about is work and the impact of work. What I don't know, because I haven't looked into it, is what kind of work is common in the Amber Valley. Okay, so when we think of our lower socioeconomic communities, this is a part of our community that's likely to be more likely in manual labour and spend their day on their feet. So how likely are they then really interested in then going and doing further activity if they spent all day on their feet? I don't know the Amber Valley kind of industry well enough to kind of make any assumptions in that space, but again, it might be something to try and think about in terms of actually who are our big employers. Is that employers of men or women? We know some types of industry are very gender biased. So actually, what does that look like locally? And might that be a part of the explanation of why we've got this inequality?
Brilliant. Thanks, Scott. Can I just come in here because we are due to finish the meeting now. So it's great that we've had the conversation and it's kept on going. Just a couple of quick ones for me. First of all, it's a thank you to everyone for your contributions today and your chat in the breakout rooms. It's been really helpful. A huge thank you to Scott for providing that information. Any other local information and data that you've got that you think would be of interest or is important for us to know about, certainly send it to me. A big ask is if you have any links with some of the people who aren't here and we feel we should be, if you can make those personal approaches, that'd be really helpful, because it's always good to come from somebody who they know. Katie has put a link to the face-to-face event in the chat, so that's going to be on the 6th of February, and it's going to be more of a workshop style event where we're going to look at what is our common purpose, who do we need to be targeting, and where do we target, and how do we do it. So it should be a really good interactive event. That just before we go, there is one final Mentimeter, which is around where you feel that you fit into this work following our meeting today. And if you could pop into, some people have already got on it. That's fantastic. I'm not that good at multitasking, but if we could pop it in, that'd be really helpful. And then, again, a final thank you. And for those of you who it is your first day back at work today, really appreciate you're making the effort to come, and good luck for the rest of the working year. I think we've got this. I'll quickly, before we finish, I'll quickly go through some of what we're seeing. So we've got becoming a walk leader with you. Where do you fit into the work? Becoming a walk leader with Walk Derbyshire, and working with you more closely on various aspects of that. That's brilliant. Is that you, Sarah? Yeah. That was Scott.
I'm in this now. You're not going to get rid of it.
Scott, while you were doing your data, there was a bit of networking going on between Helen and Sarah, which was really good. Connecting Jog Derbyshire and Walk Derbyshire. Yeah, brilliant. Coordinating, promoting, delivering. CPD. Brilliant. And as I said, all of the links will go out. There'll also be a recording of this meeting, which we'll send out as well, so that you've got the whole lot of it. If you do want to forward it to anybody else who missed it, or who you think might be interested in the face-to-face event, facilitating the work to happen, supporting our service users to engage with walking. Yeah, fantastic. And I think I will just leave you with a big thank you, unless anybody's got anything they would like to add. No, brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much today, and a happy Monday. See you at the face-to-face event.